Hi, welcome to Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. My name is George Ortega, and this is episode number 151, The Free Will Illusion, Documentaries and Fictionalizations. Okay, and this episode is going to be about what has to happen, what has happened to get this issue of free will into the mainstream, into the public eye as it has gotten over the last several years, and what is needed to kind of like then take it the next step so that eventually, hopefully sometime soon, within several years or a decade or whatever, that the civilization, basically our science and our educational systems and our societies accept, that we don't have a free will, and then by that understanding we can help create a better world. Okay, let's see, we're taping this on December 26, 2013. And I'm thinking of wrapping up this show because, as I'll explain in this show, I've been doing this for like 3 years now, and it's gotten to a point where, I've done pretty much as I can do with the show. I mean, I may pursue this through different avenues, but this show is going to be about how it's gotten to this point, at least my efforts, which I think are pretty instrumental. I'm not sure what would have happened without what I did in the past, and then what's needed to take the steps beyond. Okay, ordinarily I go through a definition of free will and refutation. I might as well do that quickly. The idea is we think we have a free will, we believe we have a free will, meaning that we think that we can do whatever we want, free of factors or principles or causes or forces that are not in our control. Okay, so the reason we don't have free will, very briefly, is because of this process of causality, cause and effect. Everything happens by this process of cause and effect. That means that everything we do has a cause, and that cause has a cause, because everything has a cause, and the cause of that cause has a cause, and you have this ensuing causal regression, this chain of cause and effect that stretches back to before we were born, before the planet was created, and that's why things way before we were born, all the way spanning back to the Big Bang, in a cause and effect manner, basically compel, everything that's happening today, everything that's going to be happening into the future. So basically that's why we wouldn't have free will. All right, and the importance of this, again, this is very much what this show will be about. Well, in a sense, it's how to get it to the public so that we can reap the importance. It's that, to the extent that we believe in free will, we blame ourselves and each other. That creates a lot of animosity, that creates a lot of competition, a lot of hatred, vengeance, revenge, and all that stuff. It's just like unnecessary pain that if we overcame the illusion, we'd do without. All right, so basically it's 2013, and I would just want to go through a brief history of what I did to kind of bring this into the public spotlight, because what happened was, before I started working on it, it really wasn't, there were a few articles spaced years apart, they would come up in a few magazines, whatever, but there's nowhere near the attention to the topic there is now. And all right, so basically, all right, what happened was in 2007, I started attending this. There's a website called Pal Talk, and a lot of websites you can text other people, you can communicate in real time. These chat rooms, right? You're talking and it's in real time. But this chat room actually would allow you to use your microphone, and you'd queue up in a line, and you would talk one at a time. It'd allow us to address an entire group of people, and then you'd talk, and then other people would grab the mic and talk, and so it was a real discussion, So anyway, 2007, I started using Pal Talk, and I noticed, interestingly, it was atheists in the atheist chat rooms, because they had a lot of people, and they tended to be kind of scientific minded. They, I would what I did is I constantly brought up the issue of free will, because they were looking for reasons to bash religion. In other words, religion, it's caused a lot of harm. It's caused a lot of good, but if you know what's happening in the Middle East, you also know that it's gotten to the point where there's so much hatred in religion. It's not right. It's just causing a lot of unnecessary pain. So anyway, so I would just kind of sometimes these atheists would be blaming the Christians, blaming the people who came up with religion. And this is just one way that I would introduce the topic. I said, fine, if you want to, if you want to say that Jesus never existed, fine. There's evidence that he never existed. There's evidence that Moses never existed, that these are stories. But like, if you want to blame these priests for like coming up with the idea of hell and then scaring the hell out of people and stuff, you can't really blame them either, because they don't have a free will. And so like, to these atheists, it was kind of a new idea, but they eventually got it. Okay, so like, in 2007, the atheists began to kind of talk about it, and I'll explain how that, really ramped it up a few years later. So then, all right, so then 2010 in April, I wanted to create a buzz about this topic. I wanted to, to reach a wide audience. Now, I know this show doesn't reach that much of an audience either here or on the internet, but I knew that by listing a meetup, not even just having the events, but by listing the meetup in Manhattan. A meetup is like this internet site that basically it organizes real-time events with real people, but the organization is all online. In other words, you join a group and then they have events, and these events you're emailed about them, or you can look up, in their website to see when they are and what they're about and all that. So you join groups and then you get together, in person with the group members. So, all right, so April 2010. Now here's the thing, so like, I could have based it here in White Plains, but, not a lot of people from New York City would look for a meetup in White Plains. We've got a population of about 57,000. So like, I decided to base it in Midtown Manhattan. It's based in the Sony building on Madison Avenue, between 55th and 56th, between Madison and 5th Avenue, right in the heart of Midtown, because there's a lot of people, on the internet who are part of Meetup, who live in New York City, Manhattan, but also in the New York metropolitan area. Now, here's the thing. Manhattan has about 1.5 million people. New York City, the 5 boroughs, the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island also, they have about 8 million, okay? But like, I noticed from going to these meetups, because I'd gone to them before, like philosophy meetups and stuff, I noticed that people from the tri-state area, the New York metropolitan area, attend these meetups also, New Jersey, Connecticut. And like, this whole New York metropolitan area, it's about 22 million people. So in other words, like, so I created this meetup, partly to get together with people on a monthly basis. We get together the first Saturday of each month to talk about it, but especially, as a very kind of like powerful way to create a buzz about it. People are surfing, people like they want to, like, with this website, you can log in, whatever, and see, well, let's see what meetups are having an event in Manhattan during a certain day, let's say a Saturday, Sunday, right? So they scroll through it, and fine. They may not be a member of my meetup. It's called Exploring the Illusion of Free Will. It started out as the Predetermined Will Society, busting the free will myth, whatever, and then I changed it. So anyway, so like, people may not join the group, but they'll see it. And when you see, like, Exploring the Illusion of Free Will or busting the free will myth, for a lot of people, this, I found this issue of free will is pretty important to them. So it creates, they start talking about it, and other people start talking about it. So anyway, that's how I kind of like started to create a buzz about this. Okay, and because of that, it was 2010. Then I noticed during 2010, there were about, let's say, half a dozen magazine articles. The media began to cover it, okay, after April 2010, when the meetup began. And then, all right, so then this show started. I started taping this show in November 2010. It premiered January 2011. So in 2011, see, White Plains, we're not a big community of 57,000, but I think some people who are, influential in Manhattan, they live here because this is a suburb. Some people don't like to live in the city, whatever. So anyway, we may have people who kind of like listen to the show here, whatever. But the other part is that, like, I started uploading the episodes to YouTube, so it got a bit more press. But anyway, because of the meetup and this show, like in 2011, then you had more coverage, more media coverage. As a matter of fact, in 2011, I mean, because this, you know, again, when I put these episodes on the internet, people from all over the world watch them. So, like in 2011, I think it was their April issue. The News Weekly New Scientist, it's a British News Weekly, came out with the first cover story. I mean, it was their you know, their actual cover story about, you know, free will being an illusion. I think it was like Free Will, the Illusion We Can't Live Without. I think that was the title. So like, all right, so like that along with other articles. And then what happened was, as a result of the meetup, one of the members, this guy Nell, he lives in Manhattan on, you know, Midtown. So we decided to produce a second show that we started out live. Now we do a live episode every month or so, but when it's not live, we present this episode. So I'm going on, I shouldn't go on this long with this, but that's all right. So anyway, so like, we start doing this live call-in TV show in Manhattan. And again, like the strategy behind that was the same as the strategy behind the meetup. In other words, when you're in Time Warner, you have this cable TV guide around, like, our show is 11 o'clock on Wednesdays, and you're scrolling to see the shows. Our show would be there. It would say no free will, you know, or whatever, you know, whatever we were calling ourselves at the time. So again, this created more of a buzz. And then by 2012, because of this show and the Manhattan show and the meetup and the videos on YouTube, enough of a buzz had been created that the magazine, the American magazine, American Scientist, Scientific American, I'm sorry, Mind, not the Scientific American magazine itself, but the one that they devote to brain science and all. It's called Scientific American Mind. It ran its first ever cover story, you know, just basically asserting that free will is an illusion. Okay, and along with that, they're like, you know, between I think 2010 and 2013, there were about 36 articles in newspapers like the New York Times, USA Today, magazines like Time Magazine, the Huffington Post, you know, just basically, you know, that had never happened before, okay? And the other thing that happened is, like, there's this neurologist, Sam Harris, who's a 3-time best-selling New York Times author, okay? He gets a huge audience. His first book was some time ago, it was End of Faith. He's basically critical of religion for some good reasons. Anyway, so like in 2012, he wrote a very brief book, but you know, that Simon & Schuster published it. It's called Free Will, and it basically explains why free will is an illusion. All right, so the idea is that, like, you know, through all these efforts, the buzz was created, the understanding that free will is an illusion is out there. And it's not going to go away when an idea reaches a certain point. It's like what Malcolm Gladwell explained in The Tipping Point. You know, it's just a matter of time before it just gets amplified more. So this show, you know, finally I get to it, is about what the next step is. Because here's what happened. Mid-2012, we had the 2012 re-election, the presidential election. What I noticed is, like, mid-2012, major media stopped covering this issue. And so I'm trying to wonder, why did that happen? I think it's pretty clear. This is like, this issue is something that people don't understand very well. People misunderstand greatly. And a lot of us, you know, without really understanding it well, it's kind of like not a very pleasant acknowledgement to realize we don't have free will. All right, so the media coverage kind of like stopped at that point. There's still, you know, a lot of bloggers, a lot of videos on YouTube, whatever, explaining why we don't have free will. But so what's the next step? Okay, the next step is to basically amplify the message that I started the first 100 episodes of this show with. Basically, the intro to this show contained a quote by an American philosopher. His name is John Searle, okay? And he's not just a philosopher. He's like, among philosophers born after 1900, he's ranked number 13, you know, in terms of how many times he's been cited by other philosophers. So he's a pretty eminent philosopher. And he was asked by this British psychologist for a book that was published in 2005, Susan Blackmore, she asked him, if free will were acknowledged by our world to be an illusion, what would this mean, right? And he said to her, I'm going to quote as directly as I can, he said, that would be a bigger revolution in our thinking than Einstein or Copernicus or Galileo or Newton or Darwin. It would alter our whole conception of our relation with the universe, okay, end quote. And so that's what Searle said. And that's how big this is. This is bigger than Einstein's discoveries. This is bigger than Freud's discoveries. This is bigger than, any of those major discoveries, because to a great extent, because a lot of times these discoveries teach us something. They teach us, for example, that we revolve around the sun and not vice versa. But yeah, fine. What are you going to do with that knowledge? I mean, it's nice to know. I mean, or they teach us, whatever. So anyway, so this is the context within what I think will have to happen next. The next steps for this. And the idea behind this is, for example, for somebody who wants to have, let's say, scientific recognition, acknowledgement for doing something great. For example, Freud, I don't know if he received a Nobel Prize or whatever, but he's basically credited as a great scientist primarily for popularizing and explaining the importance of the unconscious. He didn't discover the unconscious. The unconscious was understood before him, but he made the world aware of the importance of the unconscious, and that led to psychoanalysis, which led to psychotherapy, which led to a lot of great progress in alleviating human suffering that takes place because before that, I don't know. Before we had an understanding of the workings of the unconscious, they couldn't understand how to deal with things. But anyway, so the idea is so sometimes in science, the acknowledgement and the credit for certain things doesn't go to the discoverer, it goes to the popularizer. The same thing happened with Darwin. Darwin wasn't the first person to come up with evolution, okay? With the concept of evolution. It might actually go back to the Greeks. I may be wrong about this, but he certainly wasn't the first. But he came up with the convincing demonstration of it. His book, the origin of human species, I think, I don't know. His first book just explained it so well that it was no longer in doubt. So anyway, we're at a point in this free will question, in this explaining why free will doesn't exist, it's a myth, and why understanding this matters to the world. We're at the point where, it needs to be amplified to the world. So how do you do this? Okay, so the first way to do this is through a major motion picture, a documentary. In other words, and actually this is happening already, because what I did a couple of months ago, I emailed a lot of documentary producers throughout the world with this idea, and a few returned my email, and from those exchanges I found out actually that an internationally renowned producer, I believe, documentary producer, is already working on this project. Okay, now I don't know how soon it'll be in public, but the idea is, one documentary presenting this is already out there. And see, with some ideas you present one documentary and it receives a mass, let's say, international audience, and then it's done, right? There's not much to say. Like with climate change, perhaps that was like that, with Gore's Inconvenient Truth. But this is the kind of a documentary, this is the kind of a theme, the kind of idea that you could conceivably, in other words, if you see one documentary about it, there's going to be a lot of questions that arise, a lot of arguments to it that will arise from fundamentalist religious people, from people who are just uncomfortable with the idea. So this theme, this particular topic is perfect for sequels, for 2 and 3 and 4 documentaries, further explaining why we don't have a free will, why it's important, and the other part of this is one way to explain. For example, people are going to be afraid of what the world will look like when nobody any longer believes in free will. So what is also needed that could be part of, let's say, a docudrama, it could be part documentary, part dramatic, and this, again, major release documentaries. Basically, they could create scenarios where they would be fictionalized accounts of how people would interact with each other under the free will illusion, as opposed to believing that understanding free will doesn't exist. So in other words, like somebody does something wrong, and actually this could be a movie that, just everybody knows how we react under the free will illusion. We blame people, whatever. So this movie or this docudrama could depict the world where everyone just understands that free will is an illusion and just treats others and themselves so much more compassionately, so much more caringly and intelligently with, because of that knowledge. Okay. Another venue for amplifying this, because again, like the reason I may do a few more shows, I may continue, but I don't think so. I want to get back to the happiness stuff. But like this may take a decade or two to really be popularized. I mean, when Darwin came up with evolution, it wasn't accepted overnight. So granted, this may take years. But what I'm saying is like a major theatrical release motion picture documentary would be an amazing way to speed that up, for the benefit of everyone. But again, another thing is like if novelists, people who are really good creating stories, really pulling people in with emotional themes and just, who know how to tell a story and all, this would be a perfect theme for that. It would be kind of like a science fiction movie, except like science fiction is ordinarily about like scientific developments that don't exist, right? This would be about a scientific understanding that doesn't exist, that requires no technology. In other words, we could do this tomorrow if we wanted to, if we were fated. But so yeah, to have somebody come up with, I suppose a novel also would be great, because a lot of people read and don't go see movies. So like somebody would write a fictionalized account of a world operating much more smoothly, much more kindly, overcoming this illusion of free will, and then, having a theatrical release movie depicting that same theme. That would be another really, really great way to take this the next step forward. That's the thing, is, it's gotten to a point where it's out there, people don't like it, people don't really understand it, so it needs to be taken to the next step of explaining it further in a way that people will appreciate and people will be able to use both in their personal lives, with their everyday lives, and perhaps, ideally sociologically. In other words, like, for example, with our prison system. There are a lot of people in prisons for many, many years, longer than they should be in prison for what they've done, especially a lot of drug offenses, whatever, possession of like, for example, marijuana. Some people are in jail for years possessing marijuana, and a couple of states just actually legalized it recently, Colorado and Washington. So anyway, there's this punitive, very, harsh sentencing of prisoners is a result of the free will illusion. And as I mentioned on a previous show, history showed that when you lessen the penalties for certain kinds of crimes, crime actually goes down. But anyway, so like sociologically, in terms of our laws, it'd be good to kind of like understand our nature as it really is, to help us, govern our world most intelligently, most compassionately. Another way that this could be presented to mass audiences would be in the form of a play. And this could actually, again, be a play that's, be made into a movie. One way this could be done, there was a very famous lawyer, Clarence Darrow, who incidentally was the lawyer in this Scopes trial. Scopes was this trial where a science teacher, was being prosecuted for teaching evolution to school kids. Okay, so they took him to court, and Clarence Darrow, this famous defense lawyer, defended him, and he won. He basically won. Because basically the guy was fined $1, but that was seen as a victory. And so like there was another famous trial where two teenagers from very, very rich families, Leopold and Loeb, were convicted of this heinous crime. It was like, really, they were very troubled kids that they decided to kill a classmate to see if they can get away with it. It's sick beyond belief, right? But anyway, Clarence Darrow, the world wanted these kids put to death. Okay, it was because, and he made the point that if they were not rich kids, if they were just regular kids, it wouldn't have been as I don't know, whatever the reasons, the world just clamored for the death of these kids. So like Clarence Darrow, his defense, he basically explained, well, these kids, they didn't form themselves. They didn't obviously kids don't go around doing that. There was obviously something wrong with their minds, with their brains, with their upbringing. Something went wrong with them, right? And so it was a very dramatic defense. I read it recently. It's on the internet. Again, Leopold and Loeb. So it was so this could be made into like a one-man play where he just like explains. And what happens is like, fine, they gave him life imprisonment. They didn't let him go off completely, but at least he won because everybody wanted the death penalty. Everybody saw. I think the judge had tears in his eyes when he said, how convincing the Darrow was. So anyway, I'm running out of time. The idea is like, it's time to like move this issue from like local TV and internet, whatever, to major theatrical release documentaries. I think it'd be a great way for some entrepreneur, some production company to make a lot of money. Speaking of money, in 2005, 9, I don't know, there's a movie called What the Bleep Do We Know that kind of dealt with themes like this. It was about quantum mechanics. It said some stuff that isn't accurate and it said some stuff that was. But anyway, that movie made about $15 million at the box office. So like, a documentary like this might take $5 million and it would I think easily make $30, $45 million, around the world. All right, so that'd be a great way to like expand this knowledge, and for whoever is in the position to make money from this, just like make money. And also, just again, according to this Searle statement, it's a great way to make history. I mean, the person who creates this kind of documentary, who gets the world's attention on this, is deserving of some major praise, some acknowledgement for what he's done, as a scientific achievement. Because again, like Darwin didn't discover evolution, he popularized it. Freud didn't discover the unconscious, he popularized it. So whoever would create these documentaries, these plays, these books, whatever, would be popularizing an amazing truth. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week on Exploring the Illusion of Free Will.